I just want to give everybody a moment to get in to join the live. So we'll be starting in just a couple of minutes. It'll be a short discussion. All right. Good as time as any to start. This is Bro Diallo. Not quite the Bro Diallo show. Q4 Radio is still cut. Anyway, yeah, that was George Benson's Masquerade. Also, let me know if you have issues hearing me. I've been working on setting up better sound. So if you're having issues hearing me, yeah, I have to announce my broadcast schedule. Let me tell you what we're going to be doing for the rest of quarantine, because I did not expect things to go this long. So I didn't really have a quarantine plan, but the quarantine broadcast will be Monday. I will be doing presentations on various topics. They won't be as long as my show or as wide, but I will be speaking on various issues and or historical events, you know, just like something that you come to expect with the Bro Diallo broadcast. But, you know, the best I can do with the resources I have available. Wednesday, every Wednesday evening, we'll do a Q&A. And Friday, we will be posting just special content, book reviews, movie reviews, and other things that I'm working together with my son, too, Aromo, on. So I will be putting out content regularly on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, just like the broadcast show, until I will commit to doing that until the radio station reopens and it's safe to return and the quarantine is over. And Q4 did receive a grant that will help the radio station keep, because it's not for profit and all of that. So Q4 has been saved, and we will be able to continue to bridge the gap between opening and this quarantine. So that's one thing. But so that will be in the evenings. I guess I'll be doing this in the evenings because my mornings are kind of stacked with other stuff until the radio station reopens. But Monday evenings, normally around 8ish. I'm a little late because I wasn't able to really settle in to do this. But mornings, let's look about around 8 p.m. on between 8 and 9 p.m. Not usually this late on Mondays. Wednesday, again, between 8 and 9 p.m. Q&A live. You can ask me questions, engage. And then Fridays, it will be a post. It won't be a live broadcast, but it definitely will be a post. This Friday, I will be airing either part one. I might release part two early, but I definitely will be airing either part one, if I don't air it before. But the latest, this Friday, I will be airing my in-depth review of Culture Bandits Volume 2 by Dale Jones. But anyway, let's get into what I want to discuss with the community today. Today's presentation, or today's Bro Diallo talk, is on, I call it the Masquerade. What did I call it? Sorry. What did I say? Masquerade, public health versus state repression. Yeah, that's it. State repression versus public health. The reason I want to talk about this because I've been going back and forth online with Black folks who have a lot of suspicions about COVID-19, the existence of the pandemic, and whether or not the pandemic is real or a hoax, and if it is a hoax, what to expect versus whether or not it is a real legitimate pandemic and what we can do. Some people who accept that there is an active infectious disease out there that is very harmful, but that the transmission cannot be controlled, or what we should do, what precautions should we take or not take. There's a lot of shit floating around in the conscious Black community. But the first thing I want to say before I get into the meat of what we should or shouldn't do, I want to acknowledge the fact that if you're Black and you're not suspicious, paranoid, distrustful of the government, of the CDC, of the existence of an issue and the potential remedies of those issues, if you're a Black person that doesn't have these suspicions, paranoia, then you can't consider yourself conscious. You can't consider yourself conscious of history. Now I was going to say white history, but I mean, we're all stuck in this. You can't be conscious of history, in particular, the mentality of our oppressors, the reality of our oppression, the history of medical experimentation and medical exploitation of African people. And another thing is a term you don't really hear a lot, but was very, very rampant in the 90s, of ethno-specific epidemics, biological germ warfare. So I want to hurry up and get that out. Biological germ warfare, ethno-specific pandemics are real. Not in the case that I'm saying that COVID is one of those things. But Black people have to practice what a very wise, very well-connected African who fights for us behind the scenes. She doesn't like to be named. She doesn't want to be out there. But I know some African people, but this particular African woman who mentored me, who's in very powerful positions within official apparati, said, you need perfect paranoia for total awareness. She said she's gotten as far as she has and been able to act in the interest of African people at the levels that she has been because she has perfect paranoia, which gives her total awareness. So I am not here to mock, demean, denounce with Black people who have these suspicions, with African people who do not trust things coming out of the CDC or the World Health Organization or any of the official bodies of the state, of the systems and institutions of imperialism, global white domination, capitalism. There is no reason to trust them. There is no reason to give them our trust, loyalty, or even to blindly submit to what they tell us. I do have some texts I want everyone to check out. Some of them are a little far out there. Some of them are more mainstream. Some of them are what you could call conspiratorial. Some of them are legitimate, peer-reviewed, more scientific. But I think that as an African person, and I'm trying to be delicate here, because at the same time, you're going to be like, bro, Diallo said don't believe the CDC, and then you referencing the CDC. I understand. It's a delicate dance. But I just want to get that out of the way. Don't discount or dismiss or denounce a Black person because they say, I don't believe this shit. I don't trust this shit. I ain't with this shit. But that being said, as a Black person, your personal suspicions, your personal doubts, things that you question are valid. But what isn't appropriate and what isn't valid for you to make those suspicions public or to base instructions that you give to other people based on that alone. Suspicion, doubt, paranoia is a justified foundation for African people. But it is inadequate to make full decisions. And it is inadequate to go out amongst the people and spread the word. By the time you put yourself in front of other people and you're going to give them information and insights to direct or lead their actions, your obligation, that the self-imposed obligation, most often, you've got to come with more than just your justified suspicion, paranoia, doubt, distrust. I hope I'm being clear here. If you go back to the Bro Diallo archives, way back in February, I had some issues. One of the main issues I have is the fact that they don't define pandemic well enough. Literally, if you look at and you go to the scientific journals, you go to the science websites, you go to the CDC, you get the layman's information, they don't really define what a pandemic is, what qualifies as a pandemic. They have characteristics of a pandemic, but there's no hard definition. And ultimately, a pandemic is whenever people get sick with the same disease across borders, and that sickness spreads at a pace and at a rate that is beyond what scientists previously expected. Now, I would like, for my own comfort, to have a threshold saying, well, this percentage of the population, this level of lethality, there should be some harder definition, because that leaves us open to almost anything that can be labeled a pandemic if it crosses borders. So I was actually surprised that there was if you had asked me just walking down the street, what is a pandemic? I would have assumed in my definition, I would have said, a certain percentage of the population has to be exposed, susceptible. There has to be some hard rate of death, some level of rate and speed of transmission and lethality of it. But none of that's necessary for a pandemic. And so I had my doubts, like back in February, does this really qualify as a pandemic? Because the lethality, you go to places like Italy versus South Korea versus parts of southern China versus Japan. The lethality is all over the place, depending on where you are and who's doing the counting. So this is a little more like when you deal with Ebola, it's straightforward. You look at, and that's another thing, this Eurocentric, it's like, oh, this is the worst pandemic ever. Africa is dealing with pandemics. But that I discussed. Go back to the Bro Diallo archives. I'm going to try to stay on, so I'm not on here. It's late. Probably one of the latest times I've gone live, but I want to stick to the new Monday, Wednesday, Friday, get back to that. But anyway, there's a consistent rates. Like when Ebola hits a population, when Ebola hits the Congo, when Ebola hits Sierra Leone and Liberia, it's all tends to be, across the board. It's also like rabies is a virus. Rabies reacts the same everywhere to the remedy and to the disease process and the remedy. It all is consistent across board. So you have these viruses that are not stable, that have high rates of mutation, and everywhere you look, you're getting different outcomes for people who contract the disease. It's a little harder to trust the people who are telling you that there's this pandemic and the people who are telling you that, oh, there's nothing to fear, because everybody's a little right and everybody's a little wrong. So anyway, I'm going to tell you my conclusions and what they're based on, but I want us I want to recommend some insights. One book, because I'm still talking about ethno-specific pandemics, and these things are very real. And the thing is, if they do successfully deploy a bioweapon or an ethno-specific pandemic, because, we spend so much time mocking these 5G tower nutcakes, that when the time comes around, we'll already be inoculated, pun intended, against recognizing it until it's much too late. So there's a book called The Plague Makers. I'm sorry that it's backwards. I don't know how to fix that. Well, but anyway, this book is by Wendy Barnaby. That's her name. But anyway, it's The Secret World of Biological Warfare. That talks. Okay, sorry. I'll put it back up. Everybody didn't get to see it. The Plague Makers, that talk about biowarfare. This book is hella interesting. The River. And again, I'm sorry, it's black. If I remember, it's so late, I probably won't, but I'll remember to put links to the books in the description of the video. The Journey to the Source of HIV and AIDS, which talks about emerging viruses and things of that nature. This book, don't worry about this book, but I think every home should have a book on human anatomy and physiology and human disease and disease processes. Just understanding, having some layman's understanding. You know, these books are all over the place. You can get them, order them online, get them at Barnes and Noble. But a book that just talks about basic disease processes, congenital diseases versus chronic diseases versus infectious diseases. We should have some layman's understanding in our family and just talk about this thing. It's really accessible. This book, it's a really old book, but it's I look at it often when I'm trying to understand things. But just get you a book. And this book by Dr. Gary Null, PhD, Germs, Biological Warfare, and Vaccinations. This book is basically to give you a heads up on the concepts of bio-warfare, ethno-specific pandemics. I have some other books, but these are just, especially the three, Germs, Biological Warfare, and Vaccinations, and The Plague Makers. And this is another book. I've shown this book before. This is a book on radium physics that I got like 20 years ago when I was getting my radiographer's license. And it talks about the effects of radiation, radio waves on human anatomy and physiology and your cellular processes, DNA. I just kind of was talking about 5G. I think I did a video on 5G. I don't know. The days are kind of melting together, but just explaining how ionizing radiation that has the potential to cause malignancy or disrupt your immune processes, which makes you vulnerable to bacterial, virus infections and other opportunistic infections and parasites. And basically saying 5G got some issues, but there's really no connection between 5G and corona. That was what that is. But I just keep wanting to drive home the fact that the people who say they man-making diseases, they're weaponizing existing diseases, they're splicing DNA and making diseases that were not infectious or harmful to humans. They're trying to, make them make the leap. Gain of function testing, just Google gain of function testing. That is going on. That is happening. But do not allow the fact that our oppressors, that these genocidal maniacs are engaged in this type of behavior, drive you so far to the extreme that you will reject basic public health and public hygiene practices. Because that's where we are. Where you get so far in depth into this madness that you lose the capacity to say, hey, despite the biological warfares, despite the ethno-specific pandemics, despite them manipulating and weaponizing biological organisms like diseases, viruses, and other, infectious organisms, despite all that, there are still actual diseases. There are still real that are not a product of a laboratory or some wicked scientist or some multinational corporation or some megalomaniac billionaire. There are real diseases that we can not only contract, but we can spread to each other. So do not allow the fact that there are bioweapons, close your mind to, or every single, it's kind of like, look at when celebrities die or a famous person dies. And every single time there's a famous person who dies, I have to get off the internet, social media, for at least 48 hours, because here come all the Illuminati sacrifices. Here come all the stories, blood sacrifice. If you're a celebrity and any of your relatives die, you better hope you don't have a hit single or land a movie role or anything, because everybody's going to say, they're going to go back and look at all your pictures and check how you're doing handshakes. And if you ever threw up a peace sign or covered your mouth to sneeze or anything like that, they're going to swear it's an Illuminati signal. And I don't really buy into that shit. But I'm just saying, for you people who buy into that bullshit about Illuminati, reptilian overlord, blood sacrifice for fame, That doesn't mean people don't die for other reasons than blood sacrifices. People die of old age and natural causes and things that are non-related. So don't get so wrapped up, or when one of your beloved relatives die, you think you're about to become mainstream, or your mixtape on your SoundCloud account's about to blow up. You know what I'm saying? So that's all I'm saying. Sometimes you get so far into that suspicion and paranoia, which is justified, that you no longer can observe the world through a rational lens. Don't allow your suspicion and paranoia to guide you. Allow it to inform your decisions, but don't allow it to dictate your decisions, because then you become a nut. So there are real diseases that we can contract, that we can spread to each other, that literally have no connection to all this shit that I'm acknowledging is real. And believe you me, when I see evidence, because there are certain characteristics of planned epidemics, of bioweapon disbursement. One of the countries that has been the biggest victim in recent history of bioterrorism is Cuba. They have sent weaponized strands of anthrax to kill off cattle, and they've tried to infect the leader. They've tried to induce everything from heart attacks and strokes. There's certain things you can do, like nitroglycerin. If you can get someone to ingest nitroglycerin, they can develop an aneurysm and die. Really simple, low-key, low-tech shit. We've heard stories coming out of Korea of Korean dissidents being assassinated with bioweapons. So we know shit is real out here. We know it's possible. But there are certain characteristics of bioweapons and planned executed pandemics. First of all, any bioweapons attack has to be targetable, meaning that they have to be able to identify a region or a population of one individual or a group of people that they can somehow expose to this infectious process, and that it can be contained. Bioweapons are never just like the chemtrails, which chemtrails is nonsense. I might have to do a whole talk on chemtrails. Like that's just not how any weapon is used. That's not how any weapon is deployed. But if it is non-discriminate over a vast area of non-targeted population, then it's not a weapon. Even if it's deliberately spread, even if somebody is deliberately, like these crazy ass rednecks out here licking and coughing on people and licking on windows, that doesn't qualify as weaponized, because if it can't be directed, if it can't be contained, if the target population cannot be identified or quarantined, then it can't be classified. If you go back and read the what's the name of it? South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I've talked about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and how Nelly Mandela and Desmond Tutu are two of the biggest race traitor sellouts of the last century. And that's saying a lot, because we've had a lot of race trading sellouts. But the South African Ministry of Science did a lot of work on bioweapons, weaponizing diseases. They wanted to do everything from infect South African majority, the black majority, to infect them with diseases to cause them to die, to trying to contaminate the water source or popular products that the blacks use to sterilize African men and women. They have been engaged in it. And granted, this is a couple of decades ago. Well, shit, what, 93, 94? It was a minute ago. And they had a lot of trouble. It wasn't for lack of trying. But they always said it's very difficult to release this bioweapon and have it contained. The way DNA works, I know we'd like to talk a lot about melanin and other things. It's very hard to find markers within specific targeted populations, like diversity. In Africa, you can find more genetic diversity across the continent of Africa than all the rest of the world combined, all the other races of the world combined. So in order for them to get something that can target Africa, because we are the parents of humanity, it's hard to create something to target us that everybody else doesn't have within them already. So even though it's something they've been working on, it's not something that we have any evidence. We can have all the speculation, but there's yet to be any evidence that they've perfected these weapons. They do infect livestock, they contaminate land, they contaminate water sources. But by the time you see this shit rising up in Greece, in Italy, hitting France, Brazil, Native American reservations, south side of Chicago, rural white America, Wuhan province, that does not fit the characteristics of a bioweapon. Another element of a bioweapon means that, I know maybe some of y'all will speculate, they have the hidden cure, but it has to have a remedy. The people, no matter how insane our oppressors are, there's no evidence. Like before they release, they're not going to release poison gas, mustard gas, if they don't have gas mask. You know, they're not going to drop nuclear weapons without, they're going to have two things. They're going to have lead line protection, and they're going to have as much distance from radiation so that the radiation can be attenuated. So whenever they release something, especially something that has the potential to spread out of control, they always employ a remedy. And since we do see some prominent people being exposed, I mean, many Trump staffers, then it's another that it doesn't fit the characteristics. Another characteristic of a weapon, any weapon, but mainly bioweapon, is that the targeted population has to pose a threat or the potential of a threat. And I know we like to bang our chest and think we're so cold-blooded, but there's really no threat that they couldn't neutralize by other means. There has to be a threat that cannot be neutralized by more conventional weapons or traditional means before they level up. That's just military science 101. You use the lowest level, most basic. They could go into Iraq with nukes, but they're going to do aerial bombardment, distance, and then they're going to come in with ground troops, try to secure territory, move the DMZ or move the front, the vanguard closer. There's all these levels of rules of engagement and levels of intensification, which isn't present. I could go on and on and on, but the bottom line is there's really, aside from the wicked oppressor is just being wicked for wickedness' sake, and as wicked as they are, they're rarely just wicked for wicked's sake. They do a lot of sadistic stuff, but generally when you see something on a national or global scale, there must be some type of agenda bound with that. And I know there's a famous quote by Prince Charles, where Prince Charles says, if he had one wish to be granted, if he died and could come back as anything he wanted to be, he would come back as a virus to reduce human population. That would be his risk. So we always know that the eugenicists, the white elites, always think that the world is overpopulated and they want to depopulate the world. But they want to depopulate the world in such a way that does not disrupt the economy and that does not disrupt or reverse what they call economic progress. And economic progress under capitalism means the ongoing, uninterrupted extraction of resources and wealth from Black people and people of the world, of the global South, into the coffers and the bank accounts of people of the North. So even if you believe, well, it's just a population control, the way that COVID is attacking and afflicting the planet is not consistent with how they would execute their agenda of depopulation or population control. So even though there's elements and there's suspicion, when you really look at it, when you look at how they operate, when you look at the history of them deploying chemical weapons and biological weapons in the past, it's just this COVID thing doesn't fit. But one thing that I will say, because capitalism means to capitalize. Capitalize means to take advantage of. And Naomi Klein, that book, I got it around somewhere, Disaster Capitalism, a good book. They're going to take full advantage of this. They're going to exploit people's fear, people's vulnerability. They're going to profit from the death. We already see the statistics that the wealthy have made hundreds, have increased their billions by 100-fold as everyone else is declining or stagnant economically. But capitalizing from an epidemic, capitalizing from a global crisis is different than deliberately causing or directing a global crisis. And we have to understand the difference because we have to fight against both. But the tactics required to fight against one are different than the tactics to fight against the other. So in my conclusion, I do not think, and I really regret that I have to say this because I would think this would kind of be more commonly accepted. But again, I dwell in spaces of conscious revolutionary black folks that kind of get off to. But I have not concluded that this is a bioweapon planned, boo, boo, boo. I don't think it's a directed bioweapon. Now, all of that. I do accept that because according to the official definition, it does qualify as a pandemic. I do believe that it does present a significant threat to the black community. I care less about how it's a threat to the economy because the economy is artificial. You know, the economy. I know you've heard, if you listen to Bro Diallo, I say this all the time. John Chomsky said, under capitalism, the health of the economy has no direct correlation to the health of communities or the health of the people, meaning that economy can be thriving while people are starving. That's why countries like Haiti, Nigeria, all these third world countries are fully capitalist, and capitalism doesn't generate wealth, it concentrates wealth. Socialism creates the wealth. All wealth is socially created through collective work and cooperation. But what capitalism does is a parasite on socialism that concentrates the wealth. So most capitalist countries are impoverished. There are very few wealthy. The vast majority of capitalist nations are poor and getting poorer because that's capitalism. And the places where you don't have rampant poverty under capitalism are places where capitalism is restricted and regulated. And that's why everywhere you go that you find restricted, regulated capitalism, you find capitalists, like in the United States, the Koch brothers, who want to end all regulation on capitalism, and their stupid ass working class and poor people that want to stop all these regulations. But again, that's a different rabbit hole. But all these things are interconnected. Anyway, so Bro Diallo says this is a real pandemic. I'm not going to speculate about the origins of it. I don't think that it was a planned bioweapon, but I do think that human behavior led to not only the mutation that make it such a dangerous disease, but it also human behaviors, not necessarily deliberately creating in a lab, but creating human environmental conditions related to animal husbandry, related to the distribution of food and resources, related to the unsanitary conditions that capitalism in China, which is state capitalism. China is not capitalist, even though, not communist. China is not communist. It's just a word in the name. It's like America. The American democracy is as real as Chinese capitalism. So there are human behaviors that drive not only the mutation and jumping from speciation from non-human animals to human animals, and the spread unsanitary compact conditions where people will come together to have to earn a living under those conditions, which are ripe for the creation and spreading of diseases. And like I said, long before even the throughout history, most people who wrote down their histories and most cultures who have oral histories talk about plagues. Plagues happened long before European colonization, long before European bioweapons laboratories, and before the concept of germ theory, even before we understood that there were microscopic life forms living in our bodies. And there are literally trillions of viruses. Most of them are harmless to humans. Many of them that can be deadly to animals can be harmless to humans, or humans don't have the ability to contract them. So, but every now and then, because of the high rate of mutation and the rate of reproduction, both bacterial and viral infections do have, every so many generations, do infect and ravage through populations. Sometimes they're regional epidemics or planetary pandemics. This is something that happens. And I know because we like to study the great man theory of history. We study about all the great things men do, and we're not really well informed about what happens to the common people in history. who really suffer during these times of plague and pandemic. So anyway, it's real. It's something that we have to confront. The next thing, because it's getting kind of long, I do want to talk about precautions. I've been attacked a lot, saying people's like, "Oh, you're supposed to be conscious, but you wear a mask." I support wearing a mask as one of the precautions of public health. And the name of this thing is state repression versus public health. We are under state repression, many forms of state repression. That's the only, if it wasn't for state repression, Bro Diallo show wouldn't exist, because that's all the fuck I talk about day after day on the air when I was on the air. So yes, I do know that the state is not our friend. The state is there to control, contain, and exploit us, not to protect and defend us. I know that. I accept that. But there are public health professionals. And there is this concept, this you can go to school and study public health and epidemiology. It is a thing. It exists. And there comes times when we can apply this to our benefit. So even though the government needs to be overthrown, there are certain elements of the government, of this horrible thing y'all everybody hates except me, bureaucracy, of professionals who are employed for the purpose and trained into conceptualizing actions, regulations, policies to protect the population. It exists. So, and somebody said to me the other fucking day, how can you be a socialist living under capitalism? And I'm like, how can you be a black person living under white domination? I mean, like, what the fuck? You know, socialism is an idea, it's an ideology, and there's certain practices. And in fact, there is more socialism happening in the United States than capitalism. There's more socialism than capitalism existing within the United States. But the problem is that the little bit of capitalism that exists and the few capitalists that run this system are so fucking dangerous and so disruptive that we cannot survive or thrive. So if we take this capitalist parasite and extract it from the colon of socialism, the United States is socialist as fuck. I think I did a show on the socialist elements of America, how and everything you like about America is socialistic, and everything you hate about America is actual capitalism. But again, I don't want to reminisce about the old shows. I do miss doing my show. I miss engaging and fulfilling one of my many obligations to my community, but I digress. Public health. I've worked on epidemiological studies. I worked on a tuberculosis study in Bronx. The study was funded because many people, the Rikers Island. I worked at Rikers Island as a radiographer for 3 years, and they pulled me out of the prison infirmary and sent me to the isolation unit of the prison for the inmates that came in with infectious diseases or that contracted an infectious disease. And they found that the average inmate on Rikers Island spent less than a year there. Some would do 3 months, 2 months. But if you had a year or less on your sentence, you wouldn't be sent upstate. You would remain at Rikers. And this was at the time, this was in 90, 92, 93, 94, when Mayor Giuliani had his Broken Windows initiative. So Giuliani said the way to make society livable, the way to retake the night, to retake the streets, that they started arresting people for minor crimes. I had a homeboy, shout out to Rich Man, he used to like to smoke weed. And under Dinkins, if the cops caught you with weed, generally they take your stash and throw it on the ground and squish it and tell you to carry it yourself. If you were caught with drugs and you only had a user level of drugs, they would just take your stash and tell you to go on yourself. You had to be carrying keys or you had to be distributing and selling, then they run you in. But they knew in New York you can't run in every nickel and dime users. I know Rich Man, like that was the thing. He every time we kicked it, we would go to the smallest bar and other spots around the village. He had to have his weed. And every now and then some pig would stop us and be like, give me that, crack his pipe or stomp his little weed bag. But under Giuliani, he said everybody goes to jail for every infraction. I even got, me, the law-abiding angel that I am, I even got hemmed up by the NYPD. I was living there under Deacons Never got stopped, never got harassed. But under Giuliani, even I found myself in handcuffs. And the case was thrown out. But still, it was a waste of my time and everybody and taxpayer money. But I'm not gonna share my woes. Y'all know how I struggle. But anyway, where was I? Oh, they started throwing all these people in Rikers Island, overflowing, and there was at that time an epidemic of tuberculosis. There was a re-emergence of and that's a bacterial disease, so you can use antibiotics, but there was an antibiotic resistant strain of tuberculosis in the Bronx in the early 90s. That was a direct byproduct of Giuliani's lock every nigga up you can get your hands on policy. And Giuliani's been racist, but anyway. And even though that localized epidemic, it was mostly from the Bronx, but also parts of Harlem, Upper Manhattan. It hadn't reached Brooklyn. There were spots of it. But in that, even though that localized epidemic was caused by a racist politician who was sinister, there was public health policies and public health alerts that came out of Rikers Island, the most wicked place in New York City, which is saying a lot because there's a lot of wickedness in New York City, that was helpful. And if you lived in the Bronx in 92, 93, 94, 95, you would have exposed yourself to more harm if you've been like, I'm not trying to listen to what them pigs out of Rikers Island say. I'm not trying to go in. They locking black people up. They the ones that if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't even have this problem in the hood. So you throwing the baby out with the bathwater, or you cutting off your nose to spite your face, or you can't see the forest for the trees. There's a lot of terminology for that fallacy, saying I don't like the source of information, therefore I don't have to listen or I should reject the information. That is a fallacy. So I'm not a fan of the CDC. I don't trust it. I'm not a fan of the World Health Organization. Can't trust them. All of that. But let's not get so hostile that we neglect, because call it what you want. Broken clock is right twice a day, or whatever the shit you want to call it. But let's not go so far in that justified outrage that we neglect to take care of ourselves. If the CDC comes out and says, hey, you should drink water. Oh, fuck water then. So the mask. And let me tell y'all something about the mask, because then there's so much. People are like, mask doesn't block a virus. You're right. A cloth over your mouth or a mask does not block virus. But all you need to do is get a book on basic human diseases, a book, a textbook, grade school textbook on virology, or just go the blood clot to Google to say, how are viruses transmitted? When you catch a virus, it is not the lone microscopic, what is it, like 0.005 angstroms, like these subatomic measurements. It's not the lone virus just out there alone. Now, there are some airborne pathogens, but the most common way that virus is transmitted is through human mucosal membranes. Your mucosal membranes are your nostrils, your mouth, your anus, and ladies, vaginas. And your eyes. But the number one source of the mucosal spitting is the mouth. That's the number one source. Sneezing, drooling, or whatever, and your mouth, your holes it's moist. The second most dangerous is your nose, because unlike your eyes, which are also mucosal membranes, which also can carry infectious particles, diseases, bacteria. I've had conjunctivitis when I was first left school and first moved out of my grandmother's home and went off to college. First time on my own, I developed conjunctivitis or pink eye. Then my eyes were crusting and spewing and draining. So I had to go under isolation on downstate. But anyway, I couldn't go to class. And they sent my work to me. The greedy bastards still made me do my schoolwork. But because this is an airway as well as a mucosal membrane, You can bring things in and push things out with force, more so than your ears. Now, generally, if you're a sane person and a member of civilization, your anus and ladies, your vagina are generally covered by fabric. Now, I don't want to get crass. I'm just trying to explain to you how this shit works. So, if there is generally, viruses do not enter into the outer environment on their own. Viruses need host. They need what they call vectors. They need a means of travel. It is very seldom that a virus will exist as a virus just out there. Generally, virus is found embedded within excretions of the infected individual, whether that is a cow with cow pus or an infected udder, a pig with a runny snout. Y'all need to stop eating this goddamn meat. A lesion found under the scales of a fish, or the mucus, the saliva of a human being, or even the tears or the eye crust. Facebook, oh man, about to die. My phone's about to die. I should have charged it up. Sorry, I didn't expect it to speak this long. So anyway, long story short, it is rational to cover your mouth, not in order to stop virus from coming out of or into, but to stop the vehicles that the virus rides upon, i.e. mucus and saliva. From a sneeze to physical contact, where you can become a disease vector. A vector is something that can spread disease. So these people out here telling you about how a virus can travel through the fabric in a simple cloth mask, you ain't even got to have that N95. Anything that can stop the taking in or spewing out of mucus. If you're not around people who are actively coughing or spitting and things of that nature, you don't even really need the eye guard. It has proven that you will lower your exposure if you simply go when you're not able to be at least 6 feet. This is a rational policy. It is a sane policy. Black folks, please wear your mask, not when you're out walking and jogging. The policy is, and I've seen, but the policy is, if you are in a situation where you are not able to maintain 6 feet of social distancing, then you should have basically a cloth mask or some other minimalized covering. You shouldn't, it doesn't say, if you're out running and biking, walking in an open air space where you don't have to, where you're just passing people on the street, but you're not standing or stationary, all those things don't require you to wear a mask. But if you're in an enclosed environment with people you have not quarantined with, like around the house, I don't wear it around my son, but if you're in the shopping mall, laundromat, government building, office where many people come and go, wearing a mask is appropriate and prudent. And not only are you protecting yourself, you are giving protection to other vulnerable people. And when you look at these fucking jobs out here of people, everybody that's able to stay home and use Amazon and these other delivery services, their lifeline, they tend to be affluent white people. It is black people, mainly black youth, who are the ones out here. So it's really fucked up that you got so-called conscious black people who are trying to inform and give knowledge to the public, not willing to do the most minimum form of social distancing and protective gear. And also the physicians are saying that due to the high rate of infectious disease, we have to basically ration out healthcare. So black people were getting substandard healthcare before the pandemic. So during a pandemic, and you have even black doctors. I need to get that book called Disposable People, and there's another book called it escapes me right now, Disciplined Minds. That it shows that black healthcare professionals are no more or no less discriminatory against black patients, just like black cops are no less brutal towards black citizens. So you are committing, not only are you acting on fallacious conclusions, you are committing the crime of selfishness and doing greater harm to a population that's already under distress. So you should wear your mask. You should practice social distancing. You should stay your ass home unless you have to go out. And when you go out to the store, already target what you're there to get. Don't browse the fucking aisles. Don't browse the aisles. Take the minimum. There's a concept called as low as reasonably achievable that they teach you when you're dealing with harmful substances, diseases, radiation, things that can harm you. You should keep your exposure as low as reasonably achievable out of solidarity for Black people who don't have that option. So let me summarize. 1, the state is repressive and oppressive towards us, discriminatory towards us. Yes. We should not trust the state. Yes. We should look at several divergent sources of information. Yes. But, you know, if everything else you say, forget bro Diallo, look at it this way. If this thing is a large hoax and you have to wear a mask for a few months and stay home with your loved ones or your pet turtle for a few extra days, at worst, if they trick you and it's not a real problem, but you treat it like a real problem, at worst, you can say, man, I was a sucker. But if it is a real pandemic and you say, I'm not going to be a sucker, you know, I hate that because people are like, well, it's like I sound like the people that say, well, I'd rather heaven be real. And if heaven isn't real and I die and I live according to God and heaven isn't real, what have I lost? Versus if, you know, I know that's logic, but shit, I can back up what I'm saying. I'm not talking about a after death, afterlife experience. I'm talking about right here, right? Look at that. I'm like a minister. Lord. Anyway, y'all got me. So there are some things we have to understand. We are forcibly embedded within an oppressive, racist, white system. The pandemic, according to their definition, which I'm not happy with their definitions, but I don't have one for y'all. I don't, you know, so let's run with that. According to their definition, the pandemic, we are under a pandemic. According to what we understand and what we can research about bioweapons and things, there's really no evidence that this is a targeted bioweapon. There is evidence that the oppressors are exploiting and capitalizing on this disaster capitalism. There is backed up evidence that social distancing, cloth or basic covering of your mucosal membranes, minimizing your exposure to other people and your outing, all of those things have worked to protect individuals and communities. So we let's just go with what we know. And for the things we don't know, whether the reptiles made this shit and put it on us, whether it's all a big hoax and they lying about, let's do the minimum. And it is really absurd for people to think that it is somehow a denial of your freedom or a destruction of your freedom to have to wear a mask in public, because there's also the same people that are against being policies to wear masks are the same people that talk about, well, businesses have a right to discriminate. You know, the same libertarians who say that you should be able to say, if you don't want to serve gays or colored people, you should be able to say it, are the same people that want to deny the business the right to say no shirt, no shoes, no mask, no service. And as I say, when the precautions do become repressive, when the precautions that are imposed, the public health policies that are recommended seem to do more harm than the thing they're trying to permit, or do start to, or absolutely have no evidence that they can help us mitigate the harm, I'll be the first person with the books, with the information, with the insight, and with the backup to say, hey, fuck that. That don't sound reasonable. There's no evidence that to back up what they're recommending that we do or what they're demanding or coercing us to do. And I'll be right there with you with my tinfoil hat on saying, hell no, mask off. I'll get out there with the goddamn hillbillies, you know, but let's not jump the gun. You know, let's not, when you look silly and you hurt your argument when you call shit that is simply a public health policy, when you call that oppression, genocide, and all that. So when the real repression and genocide come, you are the chicken who cried wolf, or Little Red Riding Hood who said the sky, you know, you're the chicken who said the sky, you're Chicken Little, the sky is falling. So don't pull that trigger too fast, because by the time the conscious community steps up and say, hey, This is deliberate genocide. This is a policy of population reduction, or they're deliberately infecting. And when that does happen, we got to be slow to say that, because we want to maintain our standing and legitimacy in front of the people. So if every time somebody gets a sniff, every time something happens, we call in Armageddon, when Armageddon comes, nobody's going to fucking listen to us, and they shouldn't. So be mindful. And if you're going to if you're going to do something, if you want to do something yourself, you should be able to explain yourself to the community if you're a person who wants to engage with the community. But if you're going to be a person recommending shit to other people, know what the blood clot you're talking about. So all that said, that's all. I'm going to see y'all again Wednesday. We're going to do a Q&A. Wednesday, we're going to do a Q&A. And Friday, every Friday, and other days. But stay tuned. Subscribe to the YouTube, Bro Diallo. I'm back. We're going to get through this together. And we're going to work it out. And as I get new information and insights, believe you me, if everything I said here was wrong, I'll be the first to admit it. But I want y'all, hey, it's like, who said that? I want y'all to live. Ice-T had to go listen to Colors. This is Ice-T, and I want y'all to live. And he said that colors. That's how I feel. I'm like Ice-T in Colors. Black people, I want y'all to live. Take minimal precautions and be considerate of the people. And we're going to get through this. We done got through everything, Tuskegee. You know, we done got through a lot. Okay, good night. So that's it for Facebook. And I'll see y'all later. Bro Diallo. I'm almost tempted to say Q4 radio and all that. But anyway, I'll see y'all at the latest Wednesday. But if something come up between now and then, who knows? That's why you got to subscribe, give notifications, all of that. And I'll see y'all Wednesday, definitely. Mask on. Motherfucker, mask on. The Masquerade. Huh? Good. Okay, I'm done. Good night, y'all.